All right, hopefully this works. I think they say it's good. Oh, I'm using my old webcam. That's why it's a bit dark, but see what happens here. It's getting everything ready. Okay. I think it's live. Let me just check on the old YouTube just to get ready. Where am I going? All right, yeah, I am live. There you go. Return of the canceled stream. Yeah, I know. Last week, was it last week? I didn't do the laid back Saturdays. I had a Sunday one. My router, I had to get a new one. The Kojiko sent me a new router. So coming in loud and clear. Thank you. Let me just wait for people to come in. Actually, let me just adjust my camera if that's decent. Yeah, that's pretty good. I can't believe that my old cheap $70 camera has better picture quality than my Logitech. Like that's pretty blackpilling. But anyways, today we are covering the Californian ideology. It was a paper written in 1969. But before that, let me just wait for people to come in. Hey Gio, happy Saturday. Geo standing back, standing by. Good morning. Let me cover some news. So the Prudentialist episode was pretty good. Me and him are going to talk about doing a regular live stream together. And with my Patreon money, the first order of business with Patreon is to subscribe to a StreamYards account. So that's going to be good. I'm going to probably do regular streams with him, maybe once a week or once every few weeks, but we really wanted to focus just on like culture and things of that nature. And today after this, I'm going to be recording Patreon exclusives for Monday Modern Art Madness. I've been skipping it a week or two, and I will have about 2 or 3. I think I'm going to cover. One will be another George Gross painting, and another will be a Tracy Emin exhibit. So it's going to be Tracy Emin's, I'm thinking, her tent she did, where she had the names of all the people she slept with or was intimate with, whatever. And a Thick and Slim, that's actually pretty good. Thick and Slim Cultural Hour, that could be pretty good. I have a bunch of interviews planned. I don't know if next week. I'm debating on either releasing the Forney one or Nemitz because I do want to hold back the Nuke Telly interview because of recent events. Because honestly, I've said this on Telegram. So go to subscribe to my Telegram where I talk about how I have no taste for any more drama. And so I think next week it will either be Matt Forney or Nemitz. I'm leaning towards Nemitz, actually. I think that the Peter Nemitz interview will give Content Minded a good boost, and it was a great interview. I think I'm going to have a bit more of Nemitz on available free and public because except for the last few half, like we get into topics like the sacrament. But so that's pretty good. I also have a video next week that is a standalone video, so I haven't done one of those in a while, where I cover the recent controversy with the Canadian journalist Terry Glavin, who wrote the article in the National Post basically saying what we've all known, which is the bullshit story around last year, around the quote-unquote mass graves that was basically engineered to get Justin Trudeau elected. And the response by certain cretins both in Trudeau's government and various hack academics one in particular. I have a video on that about the 6 million average. Um, Basically, Terry Glavin debunks the claim that uh, they were being systematically, G-worded. Anyways, I'll get into it. So that's going to come out, I think, Tuesday, maybe Sunday. But I don't know, Sunday is pretty dead for YouTube because, of course, Monday is always Monday Modern Art Madness. So that is the real raw update. So go to Patreon. Also, another thing, I'm going to announce. I don't know what book to cover yet. I'm leaning towards doing Psychopolitics by Byung-Chul Han. In terms of a Patreon exclusive. I know Keith Woods, he does his book club every Sunday. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-record chapters of, I think the first one will be Psychopolitics. I was thinking of doing the Red Book, but I think honestly, like that, I'll have to hold that for a little bit. That would be interesting to do the Red Book, but it'll come out like every week, chapter by chapter. So I think the first book review will be Psychopolitics. Censored Anon, how are you, my friend? Happy Saturday, Geo, and everyone. 6 million average. Oh boy. The thing is, like, I feel bad because like the Nuke Telly interview is a really great one. And I don't want to paywall it all. But like the thing is, he gets into his beef with Nick, and I might Patreon that portion. But I really just don't want to get involved. I don't want to get the Eye of Sauron of E-celebs on me. And I mean, so I don't want to really do any more content that way. But wait, so Sensian, you helped Keith with the catabolic collapse video? Oh, that's pretty great. I have yet to watch that one, but I'm very familiar with. I haven't read like an actual book, but I've read his blog a lot, and I've watched his interviews with Jean-Michael Greer. I'm of course a very big fan and friend with Chad Haig, so he goes into catabolic collapse quite a bit. Oh, you did the editing and the thumbnail. Okay, that's great, man. I'm gonna watch that one. It's just like, yeah, it's when you're busy editing, I realize like editing takes up a huge chunk of my time now. Plus, I have to get back into art. I have to finish the painting behind me. So I do eventually want to do art videos. But the thing is, I'm going to have to record a bunch of the Modern Madness episodes. So that'll be good. But yes, please, Censored Anon is a great editor. Next week, I'm going to be debuting a logo that Censored Anon did for me for this stream, actually. It's just that I was busy doing other thumbnails last night that I didn't get a chance to use it. And I want to like really shill his banner image for my tongue twisted here. Laid back Saturdays. I'm trying to get better. Is my mic all right, or is it clipping? Like, is it loud enough, boys? Or let me boost it a little bit. Is my mic coming in? Because I don't know, YouTube. I have to go through OBS because I have my proper mic here. But is my mic coming in, boys? Is that all right? Sounds very tinny. Yeah. It's yeah. We'll see. Oh, that's weird. It sounds tinny. It's maybe because I'm like too close to it. That's probably what it is. Let me see. Yeah, it sounds all right. Oh, maybe it is. Maybe my camera is picking up the sound instead of the mic. Let me see. Well, because let's see here. Yeah, YouTube doesn't let me, doesn't let you go to, anyways, maybe, yeah, that's weird if the mic is picking it up. It shouldn't be picking it up. That's weird. Anyways, Geo is anti. I don't know if it's fine. Or it could be an issue with the gain. Yeah, it's probably the gain. Let me actually see my channel here. if it'll pick it up. Yeah, it is a bit tinny. It is a bit tinny, but I already started the stream, so we'll see what happens. Um, yeah, Leo Strauss is a liberal. I don't know if Leo Strauss is a pure liberal, but we'll see. Anyways, in real raw news, real raw news update. It seems that Russia is taking almost all of Severodonetsk. The blue and yellows they keep talking about these Western weapons are going to save them. That people are like, well, they're going to give us these missiles and it's going to target, it's going to obliterate. See the lens flash fisheye mode and stream like. Lev used to do that. He used to zoom in on his camera and do the fisheye thing. But anyways, in real raw news, yeah, they keep talking about Western weapons, and apparently they're giving them drones and all this stuff. And I don't know. I mean, it's not going to work out. I don't think. The whole thing about they're training they're making an army in the West, in Germany and Poland, and it's like there's going to be this huge April offensive. Yeah, they've only gotten 4 drones. That's right, 4 drones that the Russians are probably going to intercept anyways. But yeah, so the whole thing about there's going to be an August offensive. Like, if there was going to be an August offensive, why are you putting all of your troops into a meat grinder in Donbass? Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? 4 to 5 Russians are unhappy with Russian leadership, the special military. Not because they're against it, because they warned Putler to increase the pace. I think that there is a reason why they don't want to. I could talk this over with my good friend Gonzalo, but I think there's a purpose as to why they don't want to do a quote unquote general mobilization. I think that the thinking is probably it would give NATO a huge impetus to be more directly involved. I think that's why they haven't held back. Apparently, they've only committed what was it? Not even 30% of all of their military capacity. So, oh my God, King Salmon Fish. I'm scared to check your results for that psych test. I mean, Russians with attitude. I know people who know Russians with attitude, but yeah, that would be interesting. I hope I'm not. Again, this is terrible. If my mic is because the settings. I mean, let's see, change YouTube webcam, change mic settings. Yeah, I don't know. It's gotta change my mic input settings. Yeah, I don't know. I think it is my mic getting picked up. So I don't know how, the direct thing. I mean, I might have to. Yeah, it's tinning, but it's function up for a stream. It's because I changed to my old webcam, and I don't know why it's picking up. But anyways, hopefully it's good enough. Let's see, because if I go to edit, it's just basically the. Yeah, it's all of the other stuff, editing stuff, all the. Yeah, let's see. No, I don't know. I don't know why YouTube is doing this. This is terrible. If it is my microphone, let me see. Can you hear that? That will confirm. Have been through worse. The sound. Geocells have been through worse. Yeah, that's true. My internet cutting out every 10 minutes, every minute or so. Okay, then it is picking up my mic. This is terrible. This is terrible. I'm gonna have to ease into my mic. Anyways, Female Baristas consensus filter shifted. Search sound input. Let's see. Yeah, I know the California ideology streams are cursed. I don't know why. That's oh my God. Okay, YouTube webcam mic input. I'm not, just tell me how to do it. Privacy. Yeah, this is kind of terrible when it's just the hard webcam. If I was on my OBS, this would be much easier. But we will see. Yeah, I don't know why YouTube doesn't have the settings. Like, it's just. Anyways, in more news, let me see. I recently wrote a thread, actually, that let me find it. Where is it? People, yeah. It didn't blow up as I anticipated, but it's been a while since I wrote a thread. Eventually, it is pertinent to my series. I do know the name of my microphone. I just don't know how. I'd have to end stream to do it. No, that's how you. Yeah, that's how you do it. Onto the subject at hand. Anyways, who cares? I will fix it eventually. If not, I will go back to my old microphone. So this is a thread I did again about the nature of why they ban us all the time, and it's basically I explain why they don't just get rid of us all, but it's deeper than that. It's sort of like I've noticed this trend a lot where basically when people are confined into their Twitter, into their outside ghettos from Twitter or other major platforms like YouTube, then there's always this hermeneutics of suspicion around people that do not end up getting banned or coming back in burner accounts and so forth. Let me see. Yeah, I mean, my sound is all right. It's good enough. Technical issues gives the GeoStream a cozy underground feeling. Yeah, exactly. Next week I will have StreamYards, so hopefully that will go in the way of fixing all of these issues. So please go check out that thread I did. At the very end, the last one is pretty good as well. In other news, Alex Kashuda has a great article in American Mind about, I think it's called Gestures of the Regime. Voting. Oh, yes. Voting. Total Ford Nation victory. Too sweet. I knew it was going to happen. Rob Ford won a landslide majority, crushed the Liberal Party once again, and apparently, just turned a Fox fan on. Apparently, both Del Duca of the Liberals and the cat lady, Horwath, what's her name? I can't even pronounce her last name, of the NDP, they both resigned. Listen, I'm not a big fan of Rob Ford. I mean, sorry, no, Freudian slip. I was a huge fan of Rob Ford. R.I.P. Rest in power, Rob Ford. He was the greatest. I'm pretty sure if he would have, if the cancer wouldn't have taken him, he probably would have a good chance of being the Premier of Ontario right now instead of Doug Ford. But I'm not a big fan of Doug Ford. But I think a lot of it was because, please give a huge 07, huge salute to Rob Ford in the chat. 07 to Rob Ford. R.I.P. Rob Ford. I think that Doug Ford, his brother, his slightly R-worded brother, had to go along with a lot of the stuff, the sacraments and the lockdowns and so forth. But, I'm not a big fan of Doug Ford. But, I mean, the alternatives to Doug Ford were terrible, were ghastly. The alternative to Doug Ford was me no longer being a part of public life anymore because of my own lack of a private medical decision. So Doug Ford was really the only choice. I hate to say it. R.I.P. to our former Patriot King, currently replaced by Chet Hanks. Doug Ford was always the brain behind Rob. Rob Ford was just an agent of chaos. Yeah, but he was an amazing agent of chaos, though. That's the thing. I mean, Doug Ford. I mean, yeah, he's your typical politician. King Salmon Fish says it's not insignificant that I publicly defeated woke complaints in a coffee shop with hella style. IRL bro, greenlighting the hot chicks' real opinions. Yeah, if you go to our my King Salmon Fish interview, we talk about that incident in the coffee shop. I believe that was Content Mine Volume 1, Episode 1, I mean. Anyways, finally, for you all, so yes, RIP to Rob Ford, Doug Ford. I'm happy that he won. I'm happy that all of the other two terrible options were defeated. But anyways, let's go to the main issue. Finally, this has been delayed for like 3 weeks now, and we still have technical issues. The Californian ideology. So when I do get StreamYards, oh yeah, by the way, final point of news, this is the last one. I finally reached 3K subscribers on YouTube. So click the bell, subscribe, onwards and upwards. My goal is to get approximately around 6 to 7 to 8 to 10K by the end of the year. But we'll see what happens. I mean, yeah, it's got to get done. And go and please subscribe to Patreon. Like I said, I'm going to be releasing a bunch of Modern Era Madness episodes on Patreon. And by next week, I'm going to start my series, my book reading, chapter by chapter. Every week will be a new chapter of Psychopolitics. I think that will be the first one. But we'll see what happens. Rob Ford's aesthetic is like Trailer Park Boys / Hunter. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. No, something new just happened. Oh, so King Salmonfish says, something new just happened. I beat them and earned the favor of the sexy females. Consensus filter has been reestablished against the mob threat illusion of a fake, false woke majority. Thank you, King Salmonfish. Immensely powerful, taking over that coffee shop. We'll hit 10K subs before BTR. Well, oh, man, hopefully. Anyways, the California ideology. Let me read you the Wikipedia page. So, for those who don't know, the California ideology is a foundational, I wouldn't say inspiration, but rather a critique of the forming sort of Silicon Valley philosophy in the middle to late 90s. This came out in 96 by two authors. Let me go, where is it? Richard Barbrook is like the main author, and Andy Cameron of the University of Westminster. Described as the critique of the dot-com neoliberalism. Barbrook and Cameron argue that the rise of network technologies in Silicon Valley in the 1990s was linked to American neoliberalism and paradoxically hybridization of beliefs from the political left and right. Well, I don't know about the political right. I know what that's kind of sus. To form hopeful technological determinism. Original essay was published in Mute magazine in 1995-96. Later applied on NetTime, internet mailing list for debate. See, back in the day, people don't know this. I think a lot of like academics still do this, where they have mailing lists, where basically it's like, imagine a Telegram group or a Discord group, but like you have to email people. That's what people did back in the .com days. That's what people, they used to like literally, can you imagine the flame wars between academics emailing each other? Can you imagine that? How terribly, you think Discord is a ghetto? Anyways, Andrew Leonard of Salon called Barbara Cameron's work one of the most penetrating critiques of neoconservative digital hyperrealism. What only Salon could come up with this phrase. Neoconservative digital hipsterism. How can you do? What does that even mean? What is that like? I think that, given the view of like 2022, it's kind of like amazing how divorced free market fundamentalism is to mainstream right-wing politics. But that's kind of fascinating. So let's see the chat. Chat, are you still alive? You still there, bros? I think they mean Ben Shapiro Jr. Oh, boy. Ben Shapiro Jr. That's hilarious. So the reception. While in general, Barbrook and Cameron, central thesis, David Hudson of Rewired takes issue with the portrayal of Wired magazine's position as representative early viewpoint in the industry. Yeah, but you got to admit, like, Wired magazine was like the voice of Silicon Valley in this era. So Andrew Leonard Salon calls a lucid lambasting of right-wing libertarian digerati, domination of the internet. One of the most penetrating critiques of neoconservative digital hipsterism yet published. Then another editor of Wire magazine said that it shows a profound ignorance of economics. Well, maybe that's true. I wouldn't describe them as being like, I wouldn't say like free market politics nowadays is in any way advantageous to political right. Gary Camia of Salon recognized the validity of the main points in the essay, but like people at Wired says, ludicrous academic Marxist claim that high-tech libertarianism somehow represents a recrudescence of racism. Well, yeah, I mean, well, what's funny is that let me go to the links that they provide here. So here's see also corporatocracy, cyber utopianism, and the Dark Enlightenment. They literally link to like the Venus Project and the Dark Enlightenment in the Wikipedia page. That's pretty funny, actually. The Dark Enlightenment. Oh my crap. Maybe I'll read some Dark Enlightenment if I still have time in the stream. In the 2011 documentary by Adam Curtis, All Watched Over by the Machines of Loving Grace, Curtis concludes the Californian ideology failed to live up to its claims. Quote, the original promise of the Californian ideology was that computers would liberate us from our old forms of political control and we would become Randian heroes in control of our own destiny. Instead, today we feel the opposite, that we are helpless components in a global system, a system that is controlled by a rigid logic that we are powerless to challenge or to change. So, he was pretty right about that. Yeah, Meltdown would be more. I could read Meltdown, but that would be too boring. I mean, like the only way you can experience Meltdown is if you actually go to the video and like witness Nick Land reading Meltdown. So this is the text. Let me post the link in the chat so you can follow along. I should have just bought StreamYards yesterday so I could have had to follow along. But this is a PDF of it. Dark Enlightenment neocons. That's terrible. See, even nowadays, these political categories seem ridiculous, right? TR says, I grew up about 30 minutes from the location of the Venus Project. Nobody knows about it. Its founder died in obscurity in Sebring a few years back. I know that what was the guy's name? Joseph something. What was the founder's name? Didn't they have to like divorce themselves from other people, like the Venus Project, the resource-based economy? I remember like back in the day, Stefan Molyneux debated that one guy, Jacques Fresco. Yeah, Jacques Fresco. The other guy was like the guy that the Stefan Molyneux debated. The resource-based economy thing is kind of like, I don't know. It's kind of sus. The founder was the old guy at the beginning of the Zeitgeist. Yeah, exactly. Zeitgeist is total trash, by the way. Like the whole genealogy of religion is like terrible. So this is the text. It's in the chat for those who don't know. I should have hyperlinked it. You know what? Let me put it in the links of the description. Let me just edit it quickly. Edit. Where is it? There we go. PDF. Save. So it's in the description. I put in the description. The Venus Project, good times, bro. Glow in the dark. That's how you accelerate. So this is the Californian ideology. I'm going to read some pertinent snippets. So let me read the first beginning. So this is called As the Dam Bursts. It's only about 23 pages, but I'm not going to read all the details. I'm just going to read the most pertinent parts. At the end of the 20th century, the long-predicted over-convergence of the media, computing, and techno-communications into hypermedia is finally happening. Once again, capitalism's relentless drive to diversify and intensify the creative power of human labor is on the verge of qualitatively transforming the way in which we work, play, and live together by integrating different technologies around common protocols. Something is being created which is more than the sum of its parts. When the ability to produce and receive unlimited amounts of information in any form is combined with the reach of the global telephone networks, existing forms of work and leisure can be fundamentally transformed. New industries will be born, Current stock market's favorites will be swept away. Let's see. At such moments of profound social change, anyone who can afford a simple explanation of what is happening will be listening to what the great interest is the crucial junction, a loose alliance of writers, hackers, capitalists, artists from the West Coast, the U.S. have successfully have successfully have succeeded in defining a heterogeneous orthodoxy for the coming information age, the Californian ideology. So there you go. This new faith has emerged from a bizarre fusion of cultural bohemianism of San Francisco. So, well, keep in mind, this is where Moldbug comes from, right? With the high-tech industries of Silicon Valley promoted in magazines, books, TV programs, websites, the California ideology promiscuity combines with a freewheeling spirit of the hippies and entrepreneurial zeal of the yuppies. So if you look at, there was that one talk that Moldbug did in the 90s in Berkeley, where he had like long hair and everything. That was pretty funny. So let's see. Not surprising, this optimistic vision of the future has been enthusiastically embraced by computer nerds, slackers, students, innovative capitalists, social activists, trendy academics, futurist bureaucrats, and opportunistic politicians across the USA. As usual, Europeans have not been slow in copying the latest fad from America. While the EU Commission reports recommends following the Californian free market model for building the information superhighway, cutting-edge artists and academics, man, eagerly imitate the post-human philosophies of West Coast extropian cult with no obvious rivals. The triumph of the Californian ideology appears to be complete. So this is the basic thesis that is going forward, where you have traditionally what has been coded in America as free market fundamentalism of the political right. You have this new sort of confluence of the hippie culture, of DIY punk, cyberpunk, of this new, exciting, innovative trend of digital nomads, or what Alexander Pard called the netizens. And so this is all coming to a head in California, and it really is a shakeup of the sort of existing political categories in America. So we will see. So the widespread appeal of the West Coast ideologues, isn't simply the result of the infectious optimism. Above all, they are passionate advocates of what appears to be an impeccably libertarian form of politics. They want, while that, again, like I say, this is kind of like a nonsense category nowadays, because, I mean, tech companies are anything but quote-unquote libertarian. I mean, libertarianism is pretty much dead at this point. They all want information technology to be used to create a new Jeffersonian democracy when all individuals were able to express themselves freely within cyberspace. Yeah, do they really believe that anymore? I don't think so. However, by championing the seemingly admirable ideal, these techno boosters are at the same time reproducing some of the most atavistic features of American society, especially those derived from bitter legacy of slavery. Their utopian vision of California depends upon willful blindness towards the other, much less positive features of life of the West Coast. And here's all the left-way, racism, poverty, environmental degradation. Well, actually, the environmental degradation, the poverty thing, that if you look at what California has become nowadays, that's pretty true, actually. Then it goes on in this section about Ronald Reagan versus the hippies. How traditionally, quote unquote, they launched campaigns against militarism, racism, sexual discrimination, homophobia, mindless consumerism, and pollution. In place of the traditional left's rigid hierarchies, they created collective and democratic structures, which that's all a lie. We all know what actually happened. There was a terribly rigid hierarchy that was promoting these activists. I mean, do you know why all of these movements, put it this way. Let me go to the chat here. Do you know why all these movements were allowed to exist during the Reagan years? Is that not kind of suspicious, folks? Why all of these movements were allowed to exist during supposedly the evil, racist, homophobic Ronald Reagan. You know why? Well, I don't have to answer that because you people are smart enough to know to know that answer. It was because these movements were consented to by the elites to begin with. So this essay is kind of like there are parts of it that are basically being biased by the Marxist leanings of the two authors and don't really make sense in our era. But I do think that this essay is vitally important to understanding the foundations of where Silicon Valley is coming from, even in current 2022. I think that this essay is important. Before I go on, please smash the like button. I only have 17 likes. Please go smash that like button. Okay. The radical hippies were liberals in the social sense of the word. They championed universalism, rational, progressive ideals such as democracy, tolerance, self-fulfillment, and social justice. Embodied by over 20 years of economic growth. They believe that history is on their side. In sci-fi novels, they dreamt of ecotopia, a future California where cars had disappeared. It's basically solar punk, right? Industry production was ecologically viable. Sexual relationships were egalitarian and daily. Polycules. There you go. Silicon Valley programmer polycules. They even predicted this. Industrial production was ecologically, sexually, blah, blah, blah. Daily life was lived in community groups. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Oh, man. And we know that, listen, nowadays, current Silicon Valley is like the worst of all of that. You, instead of like this perfect utopia, you have economic degradation, mass favelization, and like basically the third world going to California. You have hideous people in polycules, other stuff I can't mention on YouTube. And you have, instead of community groups, you have like hyper atomization. So there you go. The only longing a lot of these people can feel is in a polycule. So anyways, this vision can only be realized by rejecting scientific progress as a false god, returning to nature. Others, in contrast, believe that technological progress would inevitably turn their libertarian principles into social facts. Crucially influence. Well, we know that's not true, right? So here's the thing. This is the problem right here. Polycule sounds like some disease growth of some sort. Nudge, exactly. It's a disease growth. So here's the thing that Nick Land discovered, but most Silicon Valley people didn't. They think that with technology, social hierarchy would decentralize, that there would be a utopian sort of, what's the Hayekian term? Spontaneous organization, that this would be inevitable, that they would decentralize all modes of political power when people get access to free information that can transform their lives. Like, here's what Nick Land discovered that these people did, is that it's not that technology itself creates a apparatus of social, political, and cultural decentralization. No, it's the opposite. It's that technological progress necessitates a form of extreme centralization. Sorry, my water bucket for my painting is underneath, though. I'm just rearranging my floor over here. Anyways, so what did Nick Land say? Was it the Dark Enlightenment or was it Xenosystems? I think it was the Dark Enlightenment, where he said that as technology increases, as complexity of technology and the complexity of the average mode of living increases, basically politics, or what he said is that the prevailing norm of democratic politics would become so untenable that anything but outright fascism would just not work. It just wouldn't work. Or rather, anything but outright what we're seeing nowadays, which is a form of liberal managerial authoritarianism. Anything beyond that is just not going to be tenable whatsoever, because things will not be able to function the way that they do nowadays, given the increasing complexities of technology. Now, if you have some form of rudimentary AI, then what are you going to do? You're going to say that, well, I guess we're all global citizens now, and we're all going to be in the same environment now. Like, no, that's not going to work. That's so. This essay, in some ways, is a rebuking, like Nick Land, of the prevailing California ideology. This weirdo mix of like libertarianism, social libertinism, hippie idealism, or what Terence McKenna called cyberdelia. That basically the internet is like a psychedelic filter. The internet is a mind expander, right? The internet is a mind expander, but is it the same for everybody? No. Because, again, another observation from Nick Land is that you're dealing with the hardwired differences between people, especially when it comes to IQ. So the internet is not, the internet's not going to benefit everyone equally, right? Like that's just the basic fact is that increasing complexity and increasing access to information is not going to be distributed equally. And I think that in this essay, the California ideology, they're going to allude to that as well. The internet points to acceptable views for most people. Yes, exactly. So there is also another book here called, I might read a bit at the end, called Protocol by another tech writer, by Alexander Galloway, How Control Exists After Decentralization. And it's basically, the book is debunking the theory that the internet is this like purely Deleuzian, rhizomatic, like free frontier, that in fact the internet possesses a variety of very rigid controls and what Deleuze would call the arborescent structure, the sort of state model, the hierarchy, right? So I will probably read a little bit. There is one thing where he mentions Foucault. Where is it? I highlighted it actually. Here it is. I will read a bit of that later. Let me just bookmark it here. I have notes everywhere. I have painting supplies everywhere. Oh boy. So reading on. So the radical hippies are liberal, blah blah blah. Crucially, the influenced by theories of Marshall McLuhan, these technophiles thought that the convergence of media, computing, and telecommunications would inevitably create the electronic agora. So the agora was the school of philosophy in Athens that was populated by Socrates and then later Plato. The virtual place where everyone would be able to express their opinions without fear of censorship. Oh boy, how they were wrong. How they were wrong. Despite a middle-aged English professor, McLuhan preached the radical message that the power of big business and big government would be immediately overthrown by the intrinsically empowering effect of new technology in individuals. Quote, electronic media abolishes the spatial dimension. By electricity, we everywhere resume person-to-person relations as if on the smallest village scale. It is related to in-depth and without delegation functions of power. Dialogue supersedes the lecture. Now, he was right for a time, but I mean, is this accurate nowadays? It's not. Encouraged by McLuhan's predictions, West Coast radicals became involved in developing new information technologies for the alternative press, community radio stations, homebrew computer clubs, and video collections. Yeah, this really was like in the late 90s. This was like the era of the nerd, right? Like the nerd was really getting involved to into like the sort of DIY punk culture. But now it's like, there was this documentary actually of I think it came out in 1999. there was this documentary about the first blogger, like the first major blogger, and he had like, it was about like pioneering these new forms of communication and writing, and how the blog became like this vector of like our new sort of awareness of each other in a different setting on the internet. That's like, the internet has very unique relationships to time and to discourse, right? Because the sort of function of time, the delineation of people accessing the other, the grand other, nowadays that's disrupted. Now the other is ever present. Hence the term internet time, right? Because if I'm communicating with you around the world, for some of you like me, it's like, afternoon. For others, it's like morning, right? Time becomes abolished in terms of our capacity for discourse. But that's not necessarily a good thing, though. That's not a good thing automatically, because the human mind did not develop in that way. You know what I mean? Like, my chair is, there we go. So the human mind does not have the same capacity for constant, disjunctive, chaotic, and ultimately how shall I say it? Decentralized nodes of communication. Because if you're in like multiple chats, if you're in multiple DM groups, if you're engaging in multiple sources of media at the same time, there is a question in which our relation to discourse and the retaining of conversation has been disrupted. So ideas will be transformed because of that. Really, honestly. Hence why only very few people have managed to create a solidified writing style or ideology or body of work. That's largely online. Because there is different vectors by which you enter into online discourse that isn't really conducive for deep conversation or for communication on a level that the human mind was used to up until that point. So Cyber Ninja Zero says, I recommend a video with the limitations of cryptocurrency for a breakdown of why crypto bros are fooling themselves. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. I will look into that. So moving on, this is a very important chapter, the rise of the virtual class. The rise of the virtual class. Who would have predicted that in less than 30 years after the battle for People's Park, squares and hippies would come together to create the Californian ideology? Who would have thought that such a contradictory mix of technological determinism and libertarian individualism would become the hybrid orthodoxy of the information age? And who would have suspected that the technology and freedom were worshipped more and more? It would become less and less possible to say anything sensible about the society in which they were applied. The California ideology drives its popularity from the very ambiguity of its precepts. Over the last few decades, the pioneering work of the community media activists have largely been reoccupied by high-tech and media industries. Although companies in these sectors can mechanize and subcontract much of the labor needs, blah, blah, blah. Now let's skip over that boring part. The labor aristocracy of the last century, core personnel in media, computing and telecommunications industries experience the rewards and insecurities of the marketplace. On the other hand, these digital artisans not only tend to be well paid, but have considerable autonomy over their pace of work and place of employment. As a result, the culture divide between the hippie and the organization man has now become rather fuzzy. So here is the birth of the corporate bug man. Really. He's sort of Norwooding, 30-year-old millennial lol, tech bro that wears jeans and a polo shirt to work, that has unstructured hours. No longer do we have the corporate environment of office space with your cubicle. Now we don't even have the office space. Now it's work from home. It's working in your bug pod, right? Now, initially, this was sold to you as liberation. But as we know, the cubicle offered you more liberation than the open office space and the bug pod, because now there's a collapse between what is work and what is home life, right? The 4-hour life, as Grifty Man says, is no longer applied. So yeah, Philip did. I did get your email. Part of the reason I left Twitter was that I felt the time and sink, sensibility ruiner, and threatening my ability to focus on my own creative projects. Yeah, that is true. That is very true. Yeah, I mean, some people have to work at home, Philip, but you know what I mean. You get the general gist of it. So we have this sort of weird confluence between what is the sector that makes money. But I would argue, here's the thing. Here's a crazy thought. When it comes to a term that people used for the Californian ideology, but a term that could be used, and you can find it in the Wikipedia page. This is one thing I didn't get to when I read the Wikipedia page, is you can term a lot of like current right-wing discourse into what they call quote unquote reactionary modernism, where you have the sort of both the anti-egalitarian impulse and the love of technological progress in one. Right? So this comes from the Italian futurists, obviously. So let's say that you have the like high pace, ultra masculine, older model of corporate industrial modernism. You have the Patrick Bateman types, right? We all see it. Patrick Bateman memes, right? But now with the new Californian ideology with Silicon Valley, now the nerds, the freaks, the F-slurs, they're the ones who are at the bottom of the school hierarchy. They're the ones who have the large amounts of capital and political power, and who can commandeer the new post-industrial digital forms of industry. So essentially you have an inversion of that hierarchy. No longer is the Patrick Bateman corporate masculine sociopath at the top of the stack. Now you have this weak nerd bug man who's into taking drugs and who's a programmer and who's an egalitarian. Now the so egalitarian is now at the top of the hierarchy, right? And so what these authors get wrong in this paper is that it's not this like conservative reactionary modernism. It's like they confuse free market politics with the right-wing discourse in general. This is no longer the case in 2022, right? Because the older corporate model of Patrick Bateman was much more closely aligned than nowadays with, the California ideology. Is that a better angle? No, it's a better angle. So anyways, the bug culture. We're conditioned. My office space looks real great right about now. It does look real great right about now. Mike Judge's office space. The California ideology offers a way of understanding the lived reality of these digital artisans, these netizens. On the one hand, the core workers are a privileged part of the workforce. On the other hand, they are simultaneously reflective of the radical ideas of the community media activists. The California ideology, therefore, reflects the disciplines of market economics and the freedom of hippie artisanship. Responding to the challenges of the new left and the new right, what do they mean by the new right here? Do they mean like, I'm trying to think of the context of what the new right means in 1996. Do they mean like Reaganite stuff? Do they mean like fusionism, like William F. Buckley? That could be what they mean. Because like, what the new right, I mean, what do you think of the new right? You think of that stupid Vanity Fair article, like the post alt-right, blah, 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 But here the new right, I think, means like Ronnie Reagan, like William F. Buckley, fusionism politics. Both the new left and new right have resurrected an older form of liberalism, economic liberalism. In place of the collective freedom sought by the hippie radicals, they have championed the liberty of individuals within the market space. Yet even these conservatives couldn't resist the romance of the new information technologies. Back in the 1960s, McLuhan's predictions would reinterpreted an advertisement for new forms of media, computing, and technical communications being developed by the private sector. From 1970s onwards, Alvin Toffler Those who don't know, he wrote The Third Wave. He was a very influential futurist, Alvin Toffler. Is he still alive, Alvin Toffler? Fun side fact: most albums written, well, depending on if Burton, I think Burton C. Bell, he left Fear Factory, but most Fear Factory albums are inspired by the writings of Alvin Toffler. Like, albums like Demanufacture, Digimortal, Archetype, they're all inspired by Alvin Toffler. Because Burton C. Bell is like one of these hippie techno libertarians, I'm a citizen of the world type guys, right? I was actually listening to a lot of Fear Factory recently. I was re-listening to both Demanufacture and Digimortal. Eiffel de Solapool and other gurus attempted to prove that the advent of hypermedia would paradoxically involve a return to economic liberalism of the past. The retro-utopian echoes of the predictions of Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein and other macho sci-fi novelists whose future worlds were always filled with space traders, super slick salesmen, genius scientists, pirate captains, and other rugged individuals. The path of technological progress didn't always lead to ecotopia. It could instead lead back to the America of the founding fathers. Well, I don't know about Isaac Asimov. He was a nerd. I mean, I didn't get the masculine sense when I read Foundations. I mean, the argument's easily made with Robert Heinlein, because Robert Heinlein was more of like the, it's actually, Argent did a great review in his reactionary review series. He did a great review of Starship Troopers, how it's like this, space fash fantasy, how libertarian society can be maintained by having an overtly authoritarian government on top of it. So I highly recommend that video by Argent. I think it was, if you just type in Argent reactionary reviews, Starship Troopers, it's there. Yeah, I don't know about Asimov though. I mean, Asimov was boring in my opinion. Plus, he was like one of these weirdo atheist, techno utopian nerds. But people thought he was a sexist and he couldn't write female characters, blah blah blah. But whatever. What is during that one event, Gamergate, during these ground zero of the internet? What was the term that they used? Was it misogynerds? Is that the term that they used, misogynerds? Anyways, let's read. Here we go. So, okay, now this chapter called Electronic Agora, Electronic Marketplace, it explains how the hippies sort of gave in to the free market. And I guess what we call it now is woke capital. Also Imperium Press actually, I think, released a video on woke capital recently. On the one hand, anti-corporate purity of the new left have been preserved by the advocates of the virtual community. According to their guru, Howard Rheingold, the value of the counterculture baby boomers are shaping the development of new information technologies. As a consequence, community activists will be able to use hypermedia to replace corporate capitalism and big government with high-tech gift economies. Already bulletin board systems, net real-time conferences, and chat facilities rely on the voluntary exchange of information and knowledge between the participants. In Rheingold's view, the members of the virtual class are still in the forefront of the struggle for social liberation. Despite the frenzied commercial and political involvement in building the information superhighway, the electronic agora will inevitably triumph over its corporate and bureaucratic enemies. Well, did that really happen? Did that happen? No, it didn't. It didn't happen. It's worse than ever. Oh boy, it's worse than ever. But the sentiment at this time was that voluntary information exchanges and communication and spontaneous organization would create this sort of left libertarian, anarchic social arrangement. But in fact, as we know, these things have only strengthened government control. So that went out the window pretty quickly. But the spirit of that was there in the early internet, where it truly was this sort of there was censorship, there were moderators, there were Jannies. But in terms of top-down censorship, and top-down barriers to the flows of communications. This was largely true in the early internet and the Usenet days up until, I would say, the 2000s or the 2010s. By the 2010s, this all was thrown out the window. There was no such thing as this like left libertarian, spontaneous organization, this like hippy dippy, let's all get along crap. It wasn't advantageous to the powers that be to have this anarchic social arrangement on the internet, as we know. So, moving on, these gurus were kind of wrong. For example, Wired Magazine, the monthly Bible of the virtual class, had uncritically responded to the views of Newt Gingrich, the extreme right Republican, Newt Gingrich, its extreme right-wing Republican leader, and the Tofflers, who are the close advisors. Ignoring their policies for welfare cutbacks, the magazine instead mesmerized by their enthusiasm for the libertarian possibilities offered by the new information technologies. You know what's funny? I think even Angela Nagel alluded in her book to like how it was only natural that conservatives and the right wing would find the internet. That it was almost a match made in heaven or hell, depending on where you're from. That even like Newt Gingrich, like even like a stuffy establishment conservative type, was like, wow, I guess the internet's pretty good. Because I mean, they thought the internet was good because it's like, oh, well, it'll expand the free market. But like to us, we know that the only way in which we can have massive, well, up until late, one of the only ways we can have a mass appeal is by becoming these netocrats, by becoming these hyper online individuals that can experience sort of various collective upsurges of exchanging information and of creating purely digital social movements and so forth. It was almost as if Newt Gingrich, working with the Tofflers, Alvin Toffler and his wife, it's almost like they predicted the online right in some weirdo, crazy way, unintentionally, of course. In this version of the Californian ideology, each member of the virtual class is promised the opportunity to become a successful high-tech entrepreneur. Information technologies, as argument goes, empowers the individual, enhances personal freedoms, radically reduces the power of nation-state. Existing social, political, and legal power structures will wither away to be replaced by unfettered interactions between autonomous individuals and their software. Well, in some sense, the nation state, in some sense it's true, the nation state has withered, but in its place are multinational corporations, NGOs, agenda setters, government bodies that haven't totally done away with the nation state. That the nation state, this whole like end of history fantasy has not been come to fruition. These restyled McLuhanaites vigorously argue that big government should stay off the backs of resourceful entrepreneurs. Yeah, of course, nowadays they work with the government. And other people cool and courageous enough to take risks in place of counterproductive regulations. Visionary engineers are inventing the tools needed to create a free market within cyberspace, such as encryption, digital money, and verification procedures. Indeed, attempting to interfere with the emerging properties of these technological and economic forces, particularly by the government, merely rebound on those who are foolish enough to defy the primary law of nature. According to the executive editor of Wired, the invisible hand of the marketplace and the blind forces of Darwinian evolution are actually one in the same. As in Heinlein and Asimov's sci-fi novels, the path forward to the future seems to lead back to the past. 21st century information age will be the realization of 18th century liberal ideas of Thomas Jefferson, the creation of a new civilization founded in the eternal truths of the American ideal. Well, I mean, it didn't turn out that way, did it? We're less free than ever, I guess. We're less free than ever. But, I think that in some respects, only a select class can get to have this quote-unquote unfettered freedom, right? Only those at the top can actually cultivate this sense of anarchic social, pure social agency, right? The vast majority of people exist within a corralled, censored basically algorithm policed digital space that doesn't promise this quote unquote realization of the American Founders Project. I mean, this is a delusion, right? This is a delusion. But in a sense, this worked for a time. Kevin Claremont, I'm for one supporter of the Toffler Gingrich thought. Why would lefties need such a voice outside of mainstream? So I miss when the internet was just for me and the guys in my high school tech club learning to code and playing CS. Yeah, Counter-Strike. I mean, those are the days, bros. Those are the days. Did I tell this story about Counter-Strike just quickly as an aside? One time, we did this LAN party. I was in film class, and it was the end of the year, and we had this LAN party, right, for Counter-Strike. And for some reason, I'm not a video game person. I'm not a gamer. I was like destroying everybody, right? I was destroying it. And what happened was a few people in the class, they decided to troll me by changing their usernames. Like Geo is an F slur, Geo is this, and I was like screaming, right? Like I was like, how dare you people? And then the guy that came in, he was like a total tech nerd too. He was like a Trekkie, right? He even worked in a Star Trek short film. And he comes, he's like, Geo, I can hear you down the hall. What the hell is going on? I'm like, they're trolling me. They're trolling me. Like, I was like owning everybody in Counter-Strike. But then like, oh boy. Well, let me make, okay, let's see. There's a few people I can make as mods. So subject to change, you're a mod, and Facile Goose, you are also a mod now. There you go. Add moderator. There we go. Anyway, so yeah, I was absolutely screaming my head off, and it was amazing. It was one of my best high school memories of owning my whole class in CS. So there are no curves at all in the e-girl image. Think about that. That is very true. The e-girl lacks, well, the e-girl image is the eternal shape. They have now been promoted to generals in the GeoCell army. Exactly. So the virtual class, we know that there is a virtual class who has a will to power, who can operate at a different level than the ordinary plebe, especially the ordinary right-winger on the internet. But the sort of dream of this sort of free, open cyberspace that can facilitate operations of government without centralized power, this is a fantasy. And I know a lot of like neo-reaction stuff is just like, cringe. But I think, even Moldbug at this time discovered that like this Californian ideology is sort of like bunk. Like it's not the way that government actually operates, that even if they allow certain elements of governments to become decentralized, that's not really the truth of it. The myth of the free market. So this is another chapter. Following the victory of Gingrich's party in 1984 legislative elections. So this is when Bill Clinton lost the primaries in 1984. There was the red wave, if you call it, I guess, red wave. And he had to basically play nicely with, the Republican Party. This right-wing version of the California ideology is now in its ascendancy, yet the sacred tenets of economic liberalism are contradicted by the actual history of hypermedia. For instance, the iconic technologies, the computer and the net, could only have been invented with the aid of massive state subsidies and the enthusiastic involvement of amateurs. Private enterprises played an important role, but only as one part of the mixed economy. So example goes in how the defense contractors during the Korean War had the first computational models. IBM Corporation only built the first programmable digital computer after it was requested to do so by the U.S. Defense Department in the Korean War. The history of the internet also contradicts the tenet of the free market ideologies. For the first 20 years of its existence, the net's development was almost completely dependent on the much reviled American federal government, whether via the U.S. military or through universities. Large amounts of taxpayers' dollars went into building blah 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 via internet infrastructures. I believe it was to coordinate nuclear bomb sites. One of the weirdest things about the rightward drift of the California ideology is the West Coast idea itself is the creation of a mixed economy. Blah blah blah. High-tech industrial complex has been feasting off the fattest pork barrel in the U.S. history for decades. The U.S. government has poured billions of tax dollars into buying planes, missiles, electronics, nuclear bombs, blah, 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 from California companies. At the same time, key elements of West Coast lifestyle come from a long tradition of cultural bohemianism, although they were later commercialized. Community media, New Age spiritualism, surfing, health food, recreational drugs, pop music, and many other forms of cultural heterodoxy all emerged from the decidedly non-commercial scenes based around university campuses. So it's funny, though. It's funny because, public funding, blah, blah, blah. So what's very interesting here is that from the beginning of the internet age, there was always a shift in terms of, in North America anyways, but then North America influencing other places. There was always a shift in terms of either prevailing rightward or leftward ideals on the internet. The very early internet was dominated by these tech libertarians. There was, some progressive ideals. Then there was a ramping up of social activism on the internet. But during the sort of Alvin Toffler, Newt Gingrich alliance, what is the E-right nowadays? This preempts the E-right. Newt Gingrich is the forefather of the E-right. Not Moldbug, not any other E-celeb. Fucking Newt Gingrich is the predecessor of the online right. Can you believe that? So what happened, though? What happened to this? So let me read the top again. Blah, blah, blah. Where is it? Sacred tenets of economic liberalism are contradicted by the actual history of hypermedia, blah, blah, blah. Right-wing version of the California ideology is ascendant. So what do we have now in the online right? We have cultural bohemianism, samizdat. I remember back a few years ago, it seems like everyone in the alt-right was taking psychedelics, right? Pop music, New Age spiritualism, health food, obsessions with health food, right? But what happened during the Obama years? The internet during the 2000s, after the early 2000s, and during the 2010s was a cultural leftoid black hole. It was the new atheists, and they would later go and split up into half being somewhat reactionary, somewhat, anti-SJW, then the other half being like the four people of, atheism plus was what helped create the quote-unquote SJWs. But during the Obama years, there was this huge leftward shift on the internet. And those subversive right-wing forces had to go underground. They went into 4chan. But the sort of culture war was brewing. There was something awful, then there was 4chan. There was Reddit, then there was Tumblr, Reddit, then there was, Frog Twitter, right? So that is this sort of fostering of the political landscape. But terminal Obama years, I remember this. This is when I was like, peak internet, not nowadays, but like I'm still at peak internet. But, this is when I started to become like hyper online. No, actually before that, I should say before that. I remember like it was terrible to be someone on the political right in this era. But then you only had to wait till about 2014 for things to change. So Bill Gates believes blah, blah, blah. So here is another provocative chapter, freedom is slavery. But let me just look at the chat real quickly. Going to promote toxic maxing as a right-wing lifestyle. No, actually, it's right-wing to enjoy the seed oils. Oh boy. Yes, I am at peak internet. Look at Cyberninjas here. Honestly, I would. So fuel would be in. So this is what King Salmonfish said. Fuel be insane enough to be okay with that and go get a Wi-Fi or blah blah blah. I was being literal. The e-girl image is masculine, dominated by early tech nerds, made of pixels since day one. No curves present. Always has been. The cost has been deeply G-slur. Well, actually, it's true. The e-girl is a creation, like the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, is a creation of Silicon Valley nerds. Then Severin Zero says in the chat, honestly, I wonder if King Salmonfish would pass the turning test. Oh my god, that's mean, bro. Come on. The second new right, 1964 to present, was formed in the wake of, so this is PCSS, was formed in the wake of the Goldwater campaign and had a more populist tone than the first new right. The second new right tended to focus on wedge issues. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of true, but like right wing gets complicated in the 1970s. Like this is when fusionism was really starting to take hold. I wouldn't like, you know, it was only until the 1980s did this sort of crystallize into what we know nowadays as predominantly right-wing politics in North America. Cetyl, steroid stimulants, and synthanol. Apparently, they're trying to say that melatonin's bad for you now. So there you go. Newt was probably one of the most productive politicians in the past 40 years, good or bad. Yeah, that's very true. You strip down all former Trumpers of their beliefs and they're libertarians deep down to the core. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I'm gonna get all real raw news on you. How do you explain the most recent synchronized swarm like energy for land and NRX in this network? I don't know really. I think it's Peter Thiel, put it that way. No, I'm kidding. I'm very sorry. Hard open fear, Peter Thiel. I'm very sorry. I didn't mean that. No, I'm kidding. I think that it's because certain forms of right-wing thinking are becoming mainstreamed, at least in part, not like truly mainstream. But I think that you know, Moldbug's ideas are more palatable to people than a lot of other right-wing thinkers. I think that Moldbug has achieved an ascendancy, or rather courtesy argument, because let's face it, the Moldbug of old is kind of gone. But like, let's say that as NRX achieves a level of recognition and popularity, there is a huge faction brewing in the E-right that is against them. That is against, you know, Moldbugian NRX thinking. There was actually a piece in the UN's review against Moldbug about this certain ethnicity. Of course, it's UNC review. Of course. No, I think that there is a coalition forming against the Moldbug NRX faction, but I think that NRX as a whole, is achieving a level of recognition that makes people in the underground quite uncomfortable. And whether it's feel bucks or not, like, I don't know, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know if it's a feel bucks thing. I just think that, I mean, maybe I could be wrong, and maybe all of my friends are getting in feel bucks, and I'm not. I'm an idiot. I can't believe it. How come? If you think I'd be still living in Canada if Peter Thiel gave me money, you kidding me? I'd be living in a flat in Florida right now, okay? I'd have a huge gun collection. There was subject changes. There's probably a point where I would have considered myself a libertarian. Yeah, I mean, I was a libertarian for years, right? I was, you know, right out of high school. The creature from Current Affairs, Sandifer in her class, let's be honest, most normies as well, disagree with her that there's any traction to Moldbug. They find it unreadable even. It's not so much Moldbug, it's rather Moldbug's popularizers. I think that is like, you know, it's very telling how someone like Moldbug can even, like, you know, get profiled on Tucker Carlson or something like that. So Censored Anon says they hate Moldbug is going to be very strong now that he's been accepted into mainstream. Yes, exactly. But I I don't hate Moldbug. I have criticisms of Moldbug. I just think that if anyone can contact Moldbug on Urbit, tell him to come on Content Minded. I know my good friend Astro has interviewed him multiple times. So so he says also the hate for Moldbug. So this is Cyber Ninja Zero. On the race so far, he doesn't name the Amish. He doesn't name the Amish. You know, he doesn't name the Amish people. That is why they hate him. Well, what do they What do they expect? Moldbug is of never mind. YouTube purposes, not going to comment on that. But you know. I mean, we all know, right? We all know. So now it's becoming anti-elite theory, populist coping. Like, here's the thing. I mostly agree with elite theory. I think that populism, especially after Trump, is sort of like it has to be challenged. But I mean, here's the problem. Here's the problem with the rights, like the E-right, like this light switch brain that's going on. It's like, well, if I criticize Moldbug, that means I have to be a populist now, right? I think that's unproductive. I think that you can retain a view of elite theory without being like, I'm Moldbug's strongest soldier. I think, anyways, moving on. So this chapter is called Freedom is Slavery. If the holy precepts are refuted by profane history, we have the myth of the free market as influencing the proponents of the California ideology, living within the contract culture. The digital artisans led to schizophrenic existence. On the one hand, they can challenge the primacy of market over the marketplace over their lives. On the other hand, they resent attempts by those in authority to encroach on their individual autonomy. By mixing new right and new left, the Californian ideology provides a mystical resolution of the contradictory attitude held by members of the virtual class. Crucially, anti-statism provides the means to reconcile radical and reactionary ideas about technological progress, while the new left represents the government for funding the military-industrial complex. The new right attacks the state for interfering with the spontaneous dissemination of new technologies by market competition. So, and of course, this is the predominant sort of like wave of anti-censorship by the right wing since this era from the 2010s onwards, right? With free speech, right? The California ideologues preach an anti-statist gospel of cybernetic libertarianism, a bizarre mishmash of hippie anarchism and economic liberalism beefed up with lots of technological determinism. Rather than comprehend really existing capitalism, gurus from both the new left and new right, like Reingold, believe the electronic agora will allow individuals to exercise the sort of media freedom advocated by the founding fathers, Jeffersonian democracy, blah, blah, blah. Thomas Jefferson, the man who wrote Inspiring Call for Democracy and Liberty in America, at the same time owned nearly 200 human beings. Yeah, we all, this is old. This is old hat. We all know this. Forward into the past. This is another chapter. The California ideologues have found it impossible to take a clear stand against the divisive policies of the Republicans. Just wait until Obama. Just wait until Obama. Then you'll see what happens. This is because the high-tech and media industries are key elements of the new right electoral coalition, and both capitalists and well-paid workers fear the open acknowledgement of public funding of their companies would justify tax raises to pay for desperate and needed spending. That's funny, though. I think that's in some ways not totally correct, but it is interesting how this sort of high-tech, so quote-unquote, this high-tech media industries are key elements of the new right electoral coalition, right? But you have to wait till 2016 to fully realize this. This was written in 1996. It was only until 2016 did the internet become crucial for the electorability of the Republicans under Donald J. Trump. I mean, in some ways, it's like I don't really know, though, if it's apt to say that the Republican Party of the 1990s and early 2000s into the Bush years if they really cared about the internet, or if they were just relying on boomers to vote for them, right? So Caleb R says, source of Moldbug's ideas, Italian elite school, Schmidt, juvenile can't go forward without elite theory, however. Yes, exactly. I mean, Moldbug, I think, is just like, he's become the face of that, which, I mean, has its own problems. So Pleasure Island says Moldbug's ascendancy in the mainstream is reflective of a desire for realism, but Moldbug himself isn't a realist if he denies orchestrated concentrations of power. Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm sympathetic to that as a Foucauldian, but I do believe that there is coordination, obviously. I mean, I know BAP had a good thread lately about it. There was this post I shared in my Telegram by, I forget who wrote it, but it was a pretty good post. You go to my Telegram, it's one of the recent forwards that I put on there. Oh, here we go. Here's a good one. The deprived only participate in the information age by providing cheap, non-unionized labor for unhealthy factories for Silicon Valley cheap chip manufacturers. So he's going about ecological damage of Silicon Valley. Already redlined by profit-hungry telephone companies, the inhabitants of poor inner-city areas are now threatened with the exclusion from the new online services through lack of money. In contrast, members of the virtual class and other professionals can play at being cyberpunks within hyper-reality without having to meet any of their impoverished neighbors. Aside from the ever-widening social divisions, another apartheid is being created between information-rich and information-poor. In the high-tech Jeffersonian democracy, the relationship between masters and slaves endures in a new form. So here's the thing. We see in California nowadays, and by the way, my good friend Glink has a good documentary on his channel about life in California around Silicon Valley. The thing is that it's true. There is this stark divide between the rich and the poor in California. Because, this tech bros, for example, remember the Google Glass thing? The Google Glass became a symbol of their wealth and power. Hence, if you were caught wearing Google glasses in San Francisco, you were attacked, right? So, but here's the thing. The divide between the information rich and the information poor. This is where things get complicated. Because, to bring in Nick Land, these are hardwired differences. This sort of post-left thinking about we have to talk about material conditions and real Marxism and Caleb Maupin, I'm the last true socialist. The thing is, this all collapses when it comes to the divide between the high information and low information divide of people, right? Because this is the sort of basis of Nick Land's thought when it comes to IQ. And, Spandrel talks about this more, the IQ shredder, how as technology complexifies, as social arrangements require very specialized knowledges and access to information, as academia becomes irrelevant by the spread of people like you and me. Well, I mean, I have my master's degrees, but you know what I mean. As technology and information allow the irrelevancies of institutions like academia to come to the forefront, now you have a situation like the IQ sink, the IQ shredder, the digital information sink. Because this is what Moldbug says. If we're looking at IQ as an inborn innate property, then this sort of Marxian analysis of how do we get the information poor people to become information rich? Or how can there be an equanimity? This is the problem with people like the net neutrality thing. If you ensure a quote unquote egalitarian information distribution, you are buttressing against the hard problems of distribution in terms of who can effectively utilize and come to terms with an information rich character instead of being information poor. this is where Nick Land destroys Marxism, because the sort of Marxian thinking around who is information rich and information poor cannot be the same as economic or material conditions, right? I mean, I haven't read The Dark Enlightenment in a very long time, but maybe I'll read some chapters here and there after I get done. Cyborg masters, robot slaves. I love that. That's a great chapter table. Data pagan and a cyber vegan. The fear of rebellious underclasses has corrupted the most fundamental tenet of the Californian ideology, its belief in the emancipatory potential of the new information technologies, while the proponents of electronic agora and electronic marketplace promise to liberate individuals from hierarchies of state and private monopolies. The social polarization of American society is bringing forth a more oppressive vision of digital future. The technologies of freedom are turning into the machines of dominance. According to some visionaries, the search for the perfection of mind, body, and spirit will inevitably lead to the emergence of the post-human, a biotechnological manifestation of the social privileges of the virtual class. While the hippies saw self-development as part of social liberation, the high-tech artisans of contemporary California are more likely to seek individual self-fulfillment through therapy, spiritualism, exercise, or other narcissistic pursuits. Their desire to escape in the gated suburbs of the hyperreal is only one aspect of this deep self-obsession, embodied by supposed advances in artificial intelligence and medical science. The extropian cult fantasizes of abandoning the wetware of the human state, although to become altogether to become living machines. Just like Virek and the Tessar Ashpools and William Gibson Sprawl's novels, they believe that social privilege will inevitably endow them with immortality. Instead of predicting or for emancipation of humanity, this form of technological determinism can only envision a deepening of social segregation. Whoa, that's a lot to take in. Well, that's largely true. I mean, the hippies of California, they want, like, think of it. We all know the memes, right? Eat the bugs, live in the pods, all that stuff, right? But think of it this way. In some ways, though, these have also crossed into the political right. The obsessions of health. There's certainly a large techno-futurist under the, R-Ax, right, accelerationism. There is a sort of recognition of a deeply fascistic impulse within techno-utopianism, which some people say is based. So Tommy Riley says Billy Joel's "The Future Does Not Need Us." Wired article similar to it. That's actually, I've heard of the Joy. Let me actually look this up. I may read that next, actually, for people. Billy Joy, future. The future doesn't need us. Whoa, this is from April 2000. I remember the year 2000. That was a great year, man. That was an amazing year. While the future is in need of some most powerful 21st century technologies, robotics, genetic engineering. So apparently I heard that this article was really prophetic in terms of like the operational ideology of these tech globalists, right? So that yes, I will probably read this next on Layback Saturdays or in another form, who knows. Emboldened by a supposed advance in artificial intelligence and medical science, extropian cult fantasizes of banning the wetware. Despite these fantasies, so here it comes. Oh boy, the white people in California remain dependent on their darker-skinned fellow humans to work in their factories, pick their crops, look after their children, and tend their gardens. Well, that is true. That is very true. I mean, that's why they love mass immigration. We all know why. It's basically a slave labor force. The search for the holy grail of artificial intelligence reveals the desire for the golem, a strong and loyal slave whose skin is the color of the earth and whose innards are made of sand. Oh boy, that is too woke. I don't know if I should edit that out for YouTube purposes. That was that one. Remember The Sopranos with the Hasidims? Remember? He's like, I've created my son was right. I created a golem. What's a golem? A clay monster. He's like, as the Talmud says, so he puts him up against the wall. He's like, I don't give a shit what he says. My son was right. I created a golem. Oh boy. Oh boy. Across the world, the California ideology has embraced an optimistic and emancipatory form of technological determinism. Yet, this utopian fantasy of the West Coast depends on blindness towards and dependence on the social and racial polarization of society from which it was born. But see, woke capital sort of makes this complicated because now you have this like increasingly racial consciousness that is at the forefront of Silicon Valley and tech companies and so forth. So this becomes complicated over time. But materially, though, I would say the post-left is correct. It is true that they rely on the slave force of the third world coming into America. Interpreted generously, so Jeffersonian democracy, this retrofuturism could be a vision of cybernetic frontiers whose digital artisans discover the individual self-fulfillment in either the electronic agora or the electronic marketplace. However, as the zeitgeist of the virtual class, the California ideology is at the same time an exclusive faith if only some people have access to new information technologies. The Jeffersonian democracy can become high-tech version of the plantation economy bill itself. But then people like Spandrel say that this is inevitable, that this isn't a bad thing necessarily. It's just a natural outcome. That if you give people these technologies around the world, that it's not going to suddenly give them like stats boosts in terms of IQ and things like that. I mean, there's always going to be hardwired distribution problems based on differences in human subjectivity, right? Like that's, I don't have to explain that. I'm sure my audience knows about this, right? Yeah, Spitfill. Hasidim, but I don't believe him. Paulie, Paulie could just say those one-liners, Oh boy. So across the world, the California ideology has been embarked on an optimism and anticipatory form, technological determinism, the utopian fantasies of the West Coast depend upon a blind, blah, blah, blah. Instead of the social liberalism of the new left and the economic liberalism of the new right have converged into an ambiguous dream of high-tech Jeffersonian democracy, blah, blah, blah. However, as the zeitgeist of virtual class, yeah, I already read this part. Let's move on. So the California ideology was developed by a group of people living with one specific country with a particular mix of social, economic, and technological choices. Its eclectic and contradictory blend of conservative economics and hippie radicalism reflect the history of the West Coast, not the inevitable future of the rest of the world. For instance, the anti-statist assumptions of the California ideology are rather parochial. In Singapore, the government is not only organizing the construction of fiber optic networks, but also trying to control the ideological suitability of the information distribution over it. Given the much faster growth rate in the states of the Asian tigers, the digital future will not necessarily first arrive in California. So I think that was referring to Lee Kuan Yew, right, in Singapore. I remember in the 2010s, the Singapore model was becoming like the rival faction of what people term the California ideology. I think that the Singapore model is more closely related to what Silicon Valley would go through during the Obama years than anything else. But I do think that it's really how you control an advanced multicultural society. How can you without top-down state authoritarian rule? It's impossible, right? It's highly improbable in terms of a decentralized libertarian fantasy. That's just not going to happen. I mean, if you truly had, not like nowadays in America, not a few years from now, if you truly had like a purely libertarian ANCAP society, what would happen? Would it be some kind of, fantasy of the Mises Institute? Or would it be like Sarajevo circa 1995, right? Would it be like a countrywide Sarajevo? So, but that's the thing, like, you have this competing model, which is the Singaporean model. But that also has its problems. Because in Singapore, you just become because of like the lack of land, they have like the pod apartments and so forth. You just have your work. You don't have community. There's no such thing as, I mean, community is very difficult in a place like Singapore, right? Like you just are in a worker pod, right? You are a transient pod individual. You are not like, you don't have a place of dwelling, put it that way, that Heidegger would say. Despite the neoliberal recommendations of the Bogman Report, European authorities also determined they're closely involved with the development of information technologies. But I do think that as parochial, like here's the problem, as parochial as American politics are, as we know now, those American politics of the Californian ideology would be exported and spread throughout the world. Because global culture, globalization is coded towards Americanization. The categories of culture and politics and life are coded and geared towards what America is currently, right? I mean, that may change if certain events happen, but who knows? Like, I mean, so let's skip ahead. This is all just pap. I think we're in the last chapter here. So yeah, in the last few pages, the rebirth of the modern. Even if it is not in circumstances of their own choosing, it is now necessary for Europeans to assert their own vision of the future. So this is what Baudrillard said in his book, America, ironically enough. There are varying ways forward towards the information society, and some paths are more desirable than others. In order to make an informed choice, European digital artisans need to develop a more coherent analysis of the impact of hypermedia than can be found within the ambiguities of the Californian ideology. The members of the European virtual class must create their own distinctive self-identity. Well, I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, certainly Western Europe hasn't. I mean, you could say that the EU is being run by the State Department more or less nowadays. I mean, so King Salmonfish says the Buddhist impermanence, so Shunyata, of the techno-feminist swarm as a lifestyle aesthetic. Exactly. I mean, it's funny how Buddhism, you know what's funny? I'm going to actually be talking about this with Saturnalia Sundown about Silicon Valley and how the ideas of Silicon Valley were molded by these like New Age mystery cults and these interpretations of Buddhism, Californian Buddhism, where this sort of like impermanent existence became a lifestyle choice, not an actual way of, you know, all-encompassing being or non-being, because being is, of course, a complicated word in Buddhist context, right? Especially in Mahayana. But yeah, so I could talk about that with Saturday Sundown on Content Minded. But we will see. I have a bunch of Content Minded in the works. Oh, by the way, last update. Tomorrow, it'll be out in a few weeks. I'm interviewing Eidetic Jesus or Mytho-American for Content Minded. We're going to talk about his aesthetic posting in terms of the American ambiance aesthetic. We're going to talk about his vision of the revitalization of America. He had this big thread, so it's going to be amazing. Follow Eidetic Jesus on Twitter. Follow Mytho-American on Twitter. It's going to be a great conversation. Hopefully, I'll be ready soon. But yeah, and also after this stream tonight, I'm going to release a teaser clip of my discussion with Prudentialist, the Patreon-only portion. So I'm going to give you a teaser of the Patreon-only portion. So hopefully, go and subscribe to Patreon for all the exclusive content. Like I said, soon I'm going to start a book reading thing. I'm going to be reading chapter and chapter. I'm going to release one chapter a week of, I'm probably going to start with Psychopolitics by Byung-Chul Han. So a lot of exciting stuff on Patreon. Of course, tonight I'm going to work on making some exclusive Modern Art Madness episodes on Patreon only, the more risque ones. A lot of stuff. So go down to the link to Patreon today. I mean, the failure of blue and yellow to beat Putler was certainly a massive blow to the global plan. Yeah, well, exactly. But this is why I think Western Europe has become entrenched in following America's lead because of the current situation, as we know. A European strategy for information age must also celebrate the creative powers of the digital artisans. Because their labor cannot be de-skilled or mechanized, members of the virtual class exercise great control over their own work rather than succumbing to the fatalism of the Californian ideology, we should embrace the Promethean possibilities of hypermedia. Within the limitations of the mixed economy, digital artisans are able to invent something completely new, something which has not been predicted in any sci-fi novel. These innovative forms of knowledge and communication will sample the achievements of others, including some aspects of the Californian ideology. As pioneering of the new digital artisans need to reconnect themselves with the theory and practice of productive art, they're not just employees of others, or even would be cybernetic entrepreneurs. They're also artist engineers, designers of the next stage of modernity, drawing on the experiences of the Saint Seminists and constructionists. The digital artisans can create a new machine aesthetic for the information age. So this is where you come to things like the Y2K aesthetic and so forth. For instance, musicians have used computers to develop purely digital forms of music, such as the jungle and house, jungle and techno. Nick Land writing, smoking a certain thing and listening to jungle house while he's writing, Meltdown. Interactive artisans have explored the potentiality of CD-ROM technologies, as shown by the works of Anti-ROM. The Hypermedia Research Center has constructed the experimental virtual social space called Jay's Joint. In each instance, artist engineers are trying to push boundaries and limitations of both technologies and their own creativity. Above all, the new forms of expression and communications are connected with a wider culture. The development of hypermedia must reassess the possibility of rational and conscious control over the shape of the digital future. Unlike the elitism of the Californian ideology, the European artist engineers must construct a cyberspace which is inclusive and universal. Now it's the time for the rebirth of the modern. But we all know that's all bullshit. That's, not going to happen. So this is the end. Present circumstances favor making luxury national. Luxury will become useful and moral when it will be enjoyed by the whole nation. The honor and advantage of employing directly in political arrangements. The progress of exact sciences and the fine arts have been reserved for our century. Yeah, that ain't going to happen, though. I hate to say it. That ain't going to happen. So what's very interesting here is this sort of capacity for creativity in the digital age, right? This sort of like you're going to be these artist engineers, and there's post-internet art. There's people that do it very well. There's artists like Patricia Courtwright. There are people like there's this book actually I have. It's called Art Lives Here, about like the early internet artists, right? I'll probably will do something with that in the future, but like I think that this vision becomes complicated because when it comes to like the sort of spirit of DIY creation and the sort of like artistic impulse of things like meme culture, this no longer is this like hippy dippy progressive vision. This, in a lot of ways, the vitality of it in the digital age as a digital nomad is nowadays the product of the political right. I think that there's immense amounts of improvements that need to be made. But I think it's interesting how to look back on this assessment, because the Californian ideology was such a huge work that came out. It was this, big criticism. It was one of the first criticisms of life under the auspices of Silicon Valley. That it's interesting to look back on this period of time in the late 90s and how things have developed during the 2000s and the 2010s till nowadays. Because all of these political categories, they're sort of becoming disrupted, right? No longer is Europe. I think maybe in Europe there are pockets of resistance here and there, but I think that largely they've come under the flagship of the U.S., the GAE, Global American Empire. But when it comes to in the heartland of the GAE, the political right has taken on a lot of these attributes. It seems that like what Angela Nagel said, that we are these right Gramscians, that we are like the neo-hippie nomads of the internet age that is being stamped out by power, that is being banned. Again, scroll up to my thread I recently wrote about why they ban us. let me put in the chat once again. Let me go to. I'm just finding a history. Where is it? Yeah, here we go. Let me put. This is why they ban us. So this is my thread I recently wrote last night. Why they ban us. Let me throw in the chat once again. The global American empire disco, exactly. So it's interesting how, from the perspective of the 1990s till nowadays, this becomes complicated. All of these political categories have shifted, but I still think that the prediction that there will be these like Silicon Valley people who have these like transhumanist or post-human fantasies, who really view themselves as separate entities from the rest of humanity, I think that is true. But when it comes to the spirit and the direction of creativity on the internet, in terms of the internet shaping discourse, shaping the aesthetic image, shaping the way in which images and words have operational effects upon everyday life, we can see that the e-right is at the forefront of this. But unfortunately, as we've seen nowadays, especially, I think that there is a decline period happening as certain elements of the e-right are achieving at least some modicum of mainstream success or recognition. The crab bucket is ever present. I wrote about this on Substack. The crab bucket is always there. It's always people having to janny for e-celebs. It's always like these sort of factionalisms that happen. It's people who are irresponsible with their own clout. And I feel that there is a serious danger of the e-right not working on any momentum that could create something more productive, more artistic, that could truly change things. And I feel like, but at the same time, we have to recognize that we are on enemy territory. We are on, we exist within the graces of the enemy. And I feel that the pressure that comes about from this very precarious, like I said in my thread, from the precariousness of life on platforms like YouTube here and Twitter, there is a sense of the siege mentality, but also the sense of impending dissolution of the reach and the influence that we have, that it's always under threat. In the Californian ideology, a large part of it was abandoned to go after the political enemies of people who are the Jannies of Silicon Valley and tech companies, social media companies in particular. But I don't think that the sort of like normie Republican approach of like, bringing Mark Zuckerberg up on trial or whatever, that's not going to work. It's like the whole spectacle around it is sort of not the real solution, right? Alternative platforms in some ways are not any like solution either, because they tend to ghettoize us and they tend to create very negative sort of like crab bucket shark wombing dynamics, as opposed to the big huge platforms with most people on it that are online. So I really don't know the solution to it, apart from having some form of the nationalization of social media companies. I mean, I don't know what the solution is really, but I do think that it's very interesting to go back to these texts that informed what the California ideology, what the modus operandi of Silicon Valley is. Very interesting. Yeah, the trials failed, exactly. They were meant to fail, by the way. They weren't serious. The E-girl is too focused on infighting right now. The E-fight is too focused. Yeah, I think, well, because like I said on my Telegram, I don't want to. I did my fair bit of commenting on drama, but I feel like going forward, I mean, I there's one particular e-celeb in particular I'm kind of like don't want to get in the way of. And I feel like the drama thing, it's irrelevant. Like I think even focusing or paying attention to it is sort of like, even though I have my particular criticisms of certain people, I feel like we should move on, really. And even people that I'm more aligned with, I realize that they also have limitations in terms of their messaging and in terms of their you know their work and so forth. But so the big problem I think is that the spirit of the original sort of upsurge. Oh no, don't the Gunt? I don't care about the Gunt. No, I don't give a shit. I will criticize the Gunt, but like he deserves it. He's just generally a terrible human being, Ethan Ralph. But anyways, no, I think that the problem is even people that I like is that the original spirit of Frog Twitter is gone. It's like nowadays, if you have a criticism of someone's ideas, it's like you are like an infiltrator, you are attacking me, you are a fed, you are this and that. You can't have a good faith criticism anymore of people who have ascended to the status of being a quote unquote leader in the e-right. And so that is unfortunate. Like, you can't really, it seems like you're always walking on eggshells. So it's like Ethan Ralph is the best. What the fuck? Yeah, right. I don't trust Jaden after watching Beardsoy streams, how shifty he was. Your takes on the drama was all fair. Yeah, I tried to have a bit deeper takes than people who are like directly involved in it. Sisyphean Taskmaster says this right is shaped by the technology it uses. If you want to build functional institutions, you need to build technology that encodes our values explicitly. Exactly, but that's a great point about the medium being the message. I covered this a little bit with Trash World Citizen in Content Minded episode 3. Yes, episode 3. Think of it this way: the dynamic on Twitter is a bit different because you're always under the eye of the Janny. Things are kind of a bit more amicable. There are certain people that will, just to A-log other e-celebs who haven't been banned off of Twitter, they will create burner accounts just to A-log. But I think that when it comes to the other spaces, you do have this sort of crab bucket shark wound mentality on other places after you get banned off of the major platforms. So this sort of discourse is shaped by the arena of that discourse, by the containment zone holding pen of that discourse. The fact that this stuff is even happening is sort of failure of conditions. Yes, exactly. I agree, Nudge. I agree. It's a failure. The fact that stuff is even happening. Nobody's talking about Chris Chan, but did CWC not Culture War Criminal? Christine Weston Chandler didn't Christine go back to prison recently? Not like a mental health thing, like an actual prison, I think. That's very interesting. What's going to happen with that? The work you tokenize assets, speculation, and productions. Yeah, this is why I'm skeptical of crypto as well, by the way, after reading the Californian ideology. I think that crypto is much more easy to control than what these crypto bros think. I mean, I could be wrong about that. But I think that, placing all of your faith in crypto is kind of like, I don't know. I'm skeptical of it, to say the least. I'm not knocking crypto bros. I'm just saying that they're going to find ways around it, in my opinion. I think we have to be more conservative when it comes to crypto. I think that it's not going to deliver us. I mean, I could be totally wrong. I could have egg on my face, but I don't think that crypto is the vector of this like right-wing utopianism. I think that, as things get really bad economically, I think they're going to try to find ways to clamp down on crypto. And who knows, maybe the blockchain could in some ways work to our disadvantage, but I don't know. No geo NFTs. Well, I make prints. That's kind of like a physical NFT. Printmaking is kind of like physical NFTs when you think about it. It's the original NFTs, right? Printmaking. Again, watch the limitations of cryptocurrencies. Actually, yes, I'm going to watch that Cyber Ninja Zero. I think I should watch that. It reminds me of how Nino Davellini left Pasolini to start a family. He went all dark and entered this whole Sallow phase. Oh my god. I don't know. Does that particularly celeb, is he going to produce something as great as Sallow? I don't know. Anyways, I don't want to comment on any drama again. I think this was a good stream. I think we finally conquered, the California ideology. I definitely do want to have content-minded episodes where I explicitly talk about internet aesthetics, internet art, the Y2K aesthetic. I am in contact with the Y2K NFTs. Let me throw up his account actually. Y2K. Yeah, Y2K Relic. Here you go. Go and follow my good friend Y2K Relic. He does these Y2K NFTs. Let me throw up his account here. There we go. I think, yeah, I'm going to eventually record an episode of Content Minded with him. So he was one of the first people I had in mind, actually. So we will see what happens. His website is really great, actually. It's got a lot of like essays, and it's got a lot of useful, a lot of stuff I'm into. So let me throw up his website before I leave. Come on. There you go. It's like really trippy, like old school aesthetic too. I love this. Like I like live for this type of early internet stuff, man. Like I don't know, like I just love it so much, man. It piques my millennial nostalgia. So there's the website y2krelic.net. Even like putting .net, like my God, can you not get more early internet stuff? Like, oh my God. And if you go to the white papers, you go to the article section, a lot of this stuff is amazing. I highly recommend it. Y2K Relic, go and subscribe to him on Twitter. He eventually will be on Content Minded, and it's going to be amazing. So he sells these like at Y2K NFTs as well. So he's also like a digital artist. And the articles they're fascinating. So this one article, the headline is called "The Internet Doesn't Remember." It's really great. Growing up in the Y2K times, we were constantly warned that the internet was a mutual hybrid offspring of a time capsule and a nuclear bomb shelter. Don't post anything private or personal on the internet unless you want it to eternally preserved in the great cultural fossil record of eternity. Experts claim future generations, we were assured, would skim through our cringe-inducing MySpace blogs and bully our spirits in the afterlife. Our bloodlines would forever be haunted by the embarrassing comedy skits we hosted on Yahoo Web Rings, rendered blotchy 1048. Oh my God, whoa. Thankfully, like nearly every other promise attached to technology that was made at the time, this turned out to be a sham. The web ring I hosted my unfunny comedy skits on is dissolved. The servers that held my weepy emo e-journal entries are defunct. Unthankfully, the cool stuff is all gone too, or at least scattered to the winds in several different directions, like the Dragon Balls after a wish. When I set on to the Y2K Relic project, I have no idea that my concept would require me to become a cyber detective, researcher, and archivist. But that's exactly what the project has entailed. For the models, I have to rifle through hundreds of half-dead HTML websites and databases. Oftentimes, an image would be preserved without a name, necessitating a long and exhaustive trek through parallel database where bits and bits of pieces of data could be matched to the illumination of the whole. It was a massive undertaking that took hundreds, if not thousands of hours to complete. The end result, I hope, is an artistic revelation for near history that can forever be preserved, actually preserved on the blockchain for future generations to enjoy. I imagine Y2K Relic as a little temple in cyberspace that isn't constantly being paved over with something new to grab your attention, like the billboard. A bunch of billboards on a busy highway. That's much better representation of how the internet actually works, rather than the nuke-proof time capsule we were promised. Whoa! That's amazing. Let me throw this up into the chat. Your ancestors are mad. They're just disappointed. Oh my God. Everyone in heaven knows the porn you're watching. Your grandchildren will know the porn you've watched. Anyways, go to buy his NFTs. Oh, there's my water bottle. He's going to be on Content Minded soon. Y2K Relic. Go and support him. This has been a great stream, another techno-futurist or retro-futurist stream. Do you have an Ethereum address? I do not have an Ethereum address, but if I, maybe if I offer crypto donations, maybe people will get it. Oh, yes, by the way, if you want a one-time off donation, I never show it. I have a PayPal link in the description, but if not, go to my, Patreon, patreon.com/GiantArtProductions. I'm going to have exclusive Monday Modern Art Madness video podcasts. I'm going to have the full podcast I've recorded, I believe, next week. It's either going to be Matt Forney, but it's going to be either Matt Forney or Peter Nemitz. Actually, you know what? Okay, here you go. Let's do this in the chat. Press 1 if you want me to release the Matt Forney interview. Press 2 if you want me to release the Peter Nemitz interview next week. 1 for Matt Forney, 2 for Peter Nemitz. So let me wait for the chat. Oh my God, we already have a sea of 2s. 4, you bastard, 4. So remember, 1 for Matt Forney interview, 2 for Peter Nemitz next week. So, man, everyone wants to hear Peter Nemitz. Yeah, okay. It's a done. 7. You kidding me? 1 million? Matt Forney Felted. Oh, God. I want to see you grill a BoomerCon. 3 for Sam Hyde. Well, I don't know. That's above my register. You know what? I have a mountain of 2s. So I guess next week I'm going to release the Peter Nemitz interview then. Next week on Content Minded will be my interview with Peter Nemitz. You heard it first. There we go. Gonna have to promote it all weekend. Peter Nemitz interview. There we go. So this has been a blast. I've been going on for 2 hours now. Go to all my links. I have a lot of interviews planned for Content Minded. Like I said, tomorrow I'm interviewing Eidetic Jesus, Mytho American. I eventually could interview Eggy. Me and Eggy are pretty tight. So I think I'm going to interview Eggy. And so I have that planned. I'm going to plan something with Gifts Ungiven. I'm going to plan something with Y Brown. I'm in talks with certain people to do other things. But a lot of different artists. I'm in contact with the artist Alexander Adams. So it's going to be amazing. Going to be a lot of content on Content Minded. But I guess you've heard it here, folks. You all demanded it. I'm going to release the Peter Nemitz interview on Content Minded. Please comment to my side levels. Yes, I will, King Samovish, but I have to do some stuff and I will later. Now will be the best time to have me on. Well, Philip Daniels, because you've unburdened yourself from Twitter. So I'll contact you, Philip. We'll set something up. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Go to my Patreon. I'm going to work on 2 new episodes. Well, 3 actually, because I do have to do the public one. But 2 new episodes of Modern Art Madness. That's going to be Patreon exclusives. Next week or the week after, I'm going to start recording the book review for Psychopolitics. A lot of great stuff happening on the channel and Patreon. And next week, I have an edited video on the mass graves thing with the journalist Terry Glavin. It's just a 20-minute video, standalone video. I haven't done one in a long time. And I have a bunch of writing things to do. I have to do the second installment for the E-Write series, Confederacy of Ship Posters. A lot of different things. I have to finish an article for M1776 and so forth. So a lot of good content on the way. I'm always busy. I've been busier than ever. And so I'm almost at my Patreon goal of $500 a month. And at that goal, I will start writing the book on art and aesthetics, a collection of essays that will feature essays on things like neoliberal kitsch and humans of flat design. So thank you, everyone, for coming. God bless. Goodbye. Too sweet. There we go.